She slept beneath silk canopies and woke to the sound of silver bells. Her gown shimmered like moonlight on still water, her hair crowned in pearls and gold. To the outside world, she was the very image of perfection, a queen untouchable, living in a world of elegance. But behind those gilded doors, the air was thick with stench, disease, and the quiet suffering of those who served her. You wouldn't have seen them in portraits. No painter captured the hunched figure in the shadows, pouring steaming buckets of human waste down a narrow stairwell before the sun had even risen. No poet wrote about the woman kneeling on cold stone floors, scraping dried sweat and perfume-soaked grime from a dress that hadn't been washed in months. These were the royal servants, trapped in a world where loyalty was survival, where duty meant doing the unthinkable. Their hands carried the filth of monarchs, their lungs breathed in the rot of court life, and there was no question, no refusal. In the palaces of history, beauty was an illusion, and the price of keeping it was paid in other people's misery. In the medieval mind, warm baths were dangerous. They believed heat opened the body's pores, inviting in sickness like a thief slipping through an open gate. So the queen bathed perhaps once a season, her skin cloaked in layers of scented oils, her hair dusted with powders that dulled the shine but never removed the dirt. And you, the one tasked with dressing her, stood inches away from this carefully perfumed decay. The silk gown you lifted was heavy, its seams darkened with weeks of sweat, crumbs, and skin oils. Washing such garments was almost unthinkable. Instead, you brushed away what you could, dabbed the rest with scented water, and prayed the odor would be masked before she entered court. But the smell didn't linger only in her clothing. It clung to the chamber itself, the perfume barely concealing the layered scents of rotting flowers, unwashed hair, and the ever-present chamber pot in the corner. Every day before her first audience, you would lift that pot and carry its contents through the echoing hallways, your hands chilled by the porcelain in winter, your eyes watering in summer heat. The Queen's grace was preserved at the cost of your dignity, and you knew that a single mistake, a stain missed, a lace pulled too tight, could earn you her fury. A royal bedroom was not the serene sanctuary imagined in fairy tales. Beneath the embroidery and carved oak lingered a constant sourness in the air. The combination of hundreds of breaths trapped overnight, the musk of heavy fabrics never aired, and the chamber pot's quiet threat in the corner. Cleaning it was a task that fell to you, perhaps more than once a day. You learned to keep your hands steady even when the pot sloshed unexpectedly. Learned to breathe through your mouth until the dizziness passed. But the job was never just about endurance. It was about invisibility. You moved like a shadow, silent and unseen, because your presence reminded the court of what they preferred to forget. That elegance floated on top of filth like perfume over sweat. And when the pot was emptied, the stench followed you, into the servants' quarters, into your bedding, into your very hair. You might sleep beside the kitchens or above the stables, where smoke, manure, and the tang of spoiled meat mingled into a smell that never truly left you. Over time, some lost their sense of smell entirely, a small mercy that came only after years of inhaling the palace's breath. Not every thread in the royal chamber was visible. Beneath the folds of velvet and the gleam of jewels lived tiny predators, lice, fleas, bedbugs, thriving in warmth and shadow. If the queen's scalp itched, it was you who knelt beside her, combing through strands scented with rose water but slick with sweat. Each stroke of the comb a gamble that the creatures wouldn't leap into your own hair. These pests carried more than discomfort. Lice could spread typhus. Fleas could carry the plague. In centuries before microscopes or germ theory, you had no knowledge of why a sudden fever could leave a fellow servant cold and still within days. You only knew that work meant touching danger without flinching. The bedding you shook out each morning might be crawling. The undergarments you removed might reveal raw rashes or weeping sores. Injuries you cleaned and redressed without question, knowing they could fester on your own skin before the week was out. For a queen, these rituals were part of beauty and comfort. For you, they were a slow, invisible form of Russian roulette. Royal fashion was not simply clothing, it was a display of power. The queen's gown could be a construction of 20 or more layers: linen chemises, silk kirtles, stiffened bodices, petticoats heavy with embroidery, and the final outer gown woven with gold thread. Together, they could weigh 30 pounds or more, making each dressing a test of both strength and patience. You began before sunrise, lacing her into layer after layer while she stood, arms out, a living statue. The air grew stifling with each garment, and your own back ached from the constant bending and lifting. Yet the gown itself was never truly clean. Dust clung to its hem, food crumbs lodged in its folds. The faint scent of stale sweat wove itself into the fabric's very threads. The queen never handled these garments herself. When she changed, it was you who bore their weight, folding them carefully, brushing them down, and hanging them where the perfume-soaked air might mask their odor until the next wearing. The gown might dazzle in the candlelight of the great hall, but you knew it was just a beautiful skin draped over months of filth. Serving royalty was less about the tasks themselves and more about the unspoken laws that governed them. You did not speak unless spoken to. You did not show revulsion, no matter what you touched or carried. And you never, ever refused an order. If the queen awoke in the middle of the night and rang for her chamber pot, you came no matter how ill or exhausted you were. If she demanded her hair be rebraided before dawn, you stood at her side, fingers aching in the cold, weaving strands until they gleamed. Disobedience was unthinkable, hesitation dangerous. A misplaced ribbon, a visible grimace, even a glance held too long could be seen as insolence. Punishment ranged from humiliation in front of the household to outright dismissal. And for most servants, losing a position meant trading one misery for a far worse one: starvation in the streets. So you learned to move like a shadow, to hide fatigue and disgust behind the same expression you wore whether pouring wine or emptying waste. In the palace, invisibility was the surest armor you could wear. Years of royal service carved themselves into your body. The constant bending to scrub floors, the hauling of water buckets up narrow stairs, the endless weight of gowns and mattresses, all of it ground away at bone and muscle. Knees swelled, hands stiffened, backs arched before their time. Malnutrition made you lightheaded on cold mornings, your stomach often filled with nothing more than stale bread or scraps picked from the edge of a royal feast. Illness crept in easily. There was no warmth in the servants' quarters in winter, and the damp clung to your lungs. A simple cough could turn into a fever, and a fever into something final. There were no doctors for the likes of you. Even sleep offered no true rest. The queen's needs could call you at any hour, tearing you from dreams into the cold corridors, where the stones seemed to leach the very warmth from your skin. Over time, you learned not to think too far ahead. Survival meant making it through the day, not imagining the years to come. In a palace that offered no kindness from above, it was the bonds between servants that kept you from vanishing into despair. A whispered joke while brushing out a gown, a piece of fruit slipped into your pocket by the kitchen maid, a scented cloth shared before entering the queen's chamber to press beneath your nose against the stench. These small acts of rebellion, kindness disguised as routine, formed an invisible thread between those who lived in the shadows of royal grandeur. You were comrades in quiet endurance, witnesses to each other's unseen labor. When one fell ill, others took on her tasks without question. When one was dismissed, the absence felt like the closing of a door you could never reopen. The court may have thought you silent and obedient by nature, but in truth you had your own world, one built in the brief moments when the queen wasn't looking. From the outside, the palace was a fortress of beauty, walls draped in tapestry, floors glittering under candlelight, the air thick with music and ceremony. But for those who served, it was a cage, its bars not iron, but dependence. Leaving meant stepping into a world that would not feed you, clothe you, or offer shelter. Staying meant surrendering your body and your years to endless labor, your life consumed in the service of someone else's comfort. The palace offered safety only in the way a storm offers shelter beneath a rotting roof. It kept the rain off until the collapse came. And yet, you stayed, because in that world, there was no choice. History remembers the queen, her gowns, her jewels, her grace, but forgets the hands that fastened every button, emptied every pot, and carried away every trace of the filth she left behind. Those hands were chapped and raw, the skin cracked from cold water, the nails broken from endless labor. They were never painted into portraits, never named in the court's records. But without them, the queen's illusion would have crumbled. Her beauty was a mask, and you, the unseen servant, were the one who held it in place. The palace shimmered for the world to see, but you knew its truth. Behind every golden curtain was a shadow, and behind every crown, a cost paid in silence.